Imagine this, a faint image burned onto a piece of linen, a face, a body, crucified, wounded, and yet peaceful. It isn't painted, it isn't drawn, and it isn't explainable. It's an image that behaves like a modern photograph, a negative that reveals detail only when reversed. But here's the most astounding part. This image may have been formed at the very moment of resurrection. If that's true, then we are looking at the first photograph in human history. One not taken by a camera, but by God himself. For centuries, scientists, skeptics, and believers have debated its authenticity. But beyond carbon dating and controversy lies something deeper. A story of faith, light, and divine technology that defies every human explanation. Today we're diving into the mystery of the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth believed to have wrapped Jesus of Nazareth, and why many believe it captures the single most important moment in history. Our story begins in 1353 in a small church in Lirey, France. A local knight named Geoffroy de Charny unveils a linen cloth unlike anything the medieval world had seen. The cloth measures over 14 feet long and 3.5 feet wide, large enough to cover a full human body, front and back. On its surface is a faint sepia-colored image, the front and back of a man who appears to have been crucified. Crowds flocked to see it. Many fell to their knees, believing they were looking at the burial shroud of Christ himself. Church officials were cautious; they didn't officially endorse it as authentic. But word spread fast. In 1578, the shroud was moved to Turin, Italy, where it remains today, protected in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. And from that day to this, it has baffled scientists, photographers, and theologians alike. Unlike any painting or stain, the image on the shroud is not made of pigment, dye, or burn marks. Microscopic analysis shows the colour only affects the topmost fibres, a layer thinner than a human hair. It's as if a burst of energy briefly discoloured the linen without damaging it. Even more mysterious, when photographed in 1898 by an Italian named Secondo Pia, the negative plate revealed a positive image. For the first time, the face of the man on the shroud appeared lifelike, three-dimensional, and hauntingly human. Scientists were stunned. How could a medieval forger create an image that functions like a photographic negative 500 years before photography existed? The discovery changed everything. Pia, overwhelmed, reportedly said, "I saw the holy face appear out of the darkness of my plate. It was as if I was witnessing something not of this world." The shroud wasn't just old, it was beyond explanation. It behaved as though it were encoded with light. Over the next century, dozens of studies tried to explain how the image formed. Some claimed it was a painting, yet no pigment or brushstrokes exist. Others said it was a scorch from a heated statue. Yet the image lacks depth and direction typical of burns. Then came the 1978 Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, 24 scientists, 120 hours of direct testing. Their conclusion? The image is not a painting, not a scorch, and not the product of any known chemical or artistic technique. They could not reproduce it. Even with lasers, no lab on Earth can replicate the exact chemical structure or light behavior of the shroud's image. One theory that emerged, and still fascinates researchers today, is that the image may have been created by an intense burst of radiation, possibly ultraviolet light. To believers, that burst of light recalls the moment described in Matthew 28, 2-3. There was a great earthquake, and his appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. Could the resurrection itself have unleashed a flash so powerful it imprinted the image of Christ onto his burial cloth, like a divine exposure? If so, we might truly be looking at the first photograph in existence, taken not by man, but by the creator of light itself. When scientists digitized the image, something remarkable happened. They found it contained three-dimensional information. That means the brightness and shading correspond to actual body contours, as if the image encoded depth, not just flat tone. It's the only known image in history to do this naturally. Even the wounds align precisely with the Gospel accounts. A puncture in the wrists, not the palms, matching Roman crucifixion methods. Bloodstains at the crown of the head, consistent with a crown of thorns. A wound in the side, just where John 19:34 says the soldier pierced him. Bruised knees, scourge marks, and a swollen face from beatings. Each detail reads like a forensic report, confirming the Passion narrative. But beyond science, the shroud speaks to something deeper, the compassion and suffering of Christ recorded not on parchment but in light and cloth. In 1988, a new round of testing rocked the world. 3 labs performed radiocarbon dating on a small sample of the cloth, and the results suggested a date between 1260 and 1390 AD. Headlines declared the shroud a medieval forgery. Skeptics rejoiced. But within years, researchers began finding problems. The sample came from a corner that had been repaired with medieval thread after a fire in 1532. Those fibers were chemically different from the rest of the cloth. When modern chemical analysis isolated the untouched areas, the results showed much older material, consistent with linen from the 1st century. Even pollen grains found on the shroud matched those from ancient Jerusalem and the Dead Sea area. So the mystery deepened again. If the shroud is fake, why does it contain 1st century botanical material, Middle Eastern dirt, and an image science still cannot recreate? Think about it. In a world before lenses, chemicals, or cameras, a single moment in time may have been captured with divine precision. If Christ's resurrection released a burst of glorified energy, the same power that defeats death, that radiant surge could have imprinted his image on the cloth surrounding him. In other words, the first photograph in human history might not have come from human hands at all, but from the hands of God. John 1:4-5 says, "In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." If that light, pure, resurrecting, uncontainable, met linen, what would it leave behind? Perhaps exactly what we see today, a faint reflection of glory, a flash of eternity sealed into fabric. Whether you believe the Shroud of Turin is the true burial cloth of Jesus or not, it stands as a haunting testimony to faith and mystery. It reminds us that God's story is not only written in Scripture, it's woven into history, stone, and fibre. And maybe, just maybe, this ancient piece of linen carries the fingerprint of the resurrection, a silent witness to the moment when death itself was conquered. As believers, we know our faith doesn't rest on relics, but on the living Christ. Yet, when science meets the supernatural and light etches life onto cloth, how can we not stand in awe? The shroud calls us to remember that the same power that could leave that image is the same power that still transforms hearts today. If you found this journey into history and faith inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that light always conquers darkness. And remember, God didn't just create light, He is the light.